Sonic Talk.
Hello everybody, welcome to Sonic Talk episode 523, recording today, Valentine's Day. I hope you got your requisite amount of anonymous adoration, or if not, from your partner, the token one that after a certain number of years you just you still give, but it maybe doesn't have the same amount of excitement because you know you're going to get something. Maybe that's just my life. I don't know. I probably shouldn't go into too much detail there. But anyway, happy Valentine's Day to you all. Sonic Talk, of course, is the podcast to do with music technology and software, music production, live production, technology that affects music, all of those things. So there's lots of stuff. Obviously, we're just coming out of the NAMM cycle. Last week was the first show after we got back. And while we had Mr. Gaz Williams with us last week, who actually came to NAMM, and we talked about it at great depth, which is good. We also have this week Mr. Yoad Nevo, who is in Tel Aviv, not in his facility in London. Where we normally see him in front of his expansive... Is it Neve desk? It is Neve, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But you also viewed NAMM from afar as well, so maybe what we should do... I'll just... is perhaps... We'll start with your thoughts about it, but before, I'll just finish your introduction, obviously, which music producer, engineer, developer for Waves, many things, as is the case with lots of people who work in the music industry now, a man with many hats, and while you're in Israel at the moment, you're working on with your Waves job. So how are you, Yoad? Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to be back.
Good to have you as well. It feels like an awfully long time that we haven't had you on. I mean, you experienced the full NAMM experience from afar. So I should ask you what your impressions were.
Well, I didn't have that much time to follow it, but I've noticed a couple of things. One is the Korg prologue.
Well remembered there.
Which we just came out, was announced like a couple of days before NAMM. Which looks very promising, and I'm very, very curious to get my hands on one. And the other thing was the world of, not sure what it's called, but the big kind of beast,
the Quantum,
that they've that looks very, very interesting as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, I didn't kind of find that I got kind of all excited about the prologue, and I did mention that last week. But Jim Hayward, who's the guy who runs the Synth Memes Facebook group, he was also working, sort of gathering kind of photos and live blog stuff for us there, and he really sort of fell for it big time. And he's really. So I'm guessing it works very much for a lot of people. The interesting thing about it being that it's got that third digital oscillator. So I think that's the thing that is the sort
Absolutely.
of the unknown. Is that the sort of thing that thrills you?
Yeah, but even not quite. I mean, that too, with a built-in FM oscillator, it can do like loads of different things, and hopefully there'll be additive and an additive engine in there, or wavetable or whatever. But for me, it's I know it's not. It has nothing to do with the Poly6, but I like to see it as nowadays Poly6 kind of thing, because because it's a new polyphonic Korg, regardless of the way it sounds or whatever. And for me, the Poly6 is, it's one of the first. I think it was the first polyphonic thing synth that I got my hands on back in the day when I was working in a music shop, and we got one, and it was unbelievable. It was amazing, and I still love it. I still love the kind of resonance sweep that you can scan the harmonics and all that. I love that, and I would like to think of the new prologue as a kind of a modern Poly6.
That's an interesting take on it. Yeah, I mean, any kind of three oscillator polysynth is kind of big news, I guess. I mean, the Quantum I think has three as well. I mean, obviously, completely different price point. and much more technology, as we talked about before. It's just got a lot of extra stuff in it. But the other thing that I don't know if you saw, the STVC, which is the Waldorf, it's like a Strikefet / vocoder, which also looked pretty nice. Which again, Behringer once again have dropped in the. Is it the V3 or the V? They've done a kind of string vocoder machine.
Yeah. The Roland, the classic one, which again is very interesting. But I'm very curious to see how this new line of new old synths that Behringer are putting out or will put out is going to, how it's going to sound, how much it's going to cost, whether it's all going to fit in Euroracks or not, or quite curious about that.
Yeah, I think the vocoder, the string vocoder thing, is actually more of a. It's not the small format. It's got an actual keyboard on it. I think it's more like maybe DeepMind 6 kind of size. That type of thing. But again, we'll see. I mean, I think there's been a couple of. There was a demo. I've forgotten the name of the chap. I think it's Fire. I can't remember what his name is. He did an audio demo, which was actually pretty cool. And the vocoder sounded pretty articulate. So there's obviously some kind of production or pre-production model. So I'm guessing it's coming at some point. But I mean, judging by the amount of stuff they're going to be releasing out, it's going to be pretty much hogging the news as much as possible. So in terms of any other stuff, I mean, the pro audio side or software side, anything else kind of float your boat from now?
I have to say that I've not... I obviously followed the Sonicstate news, but not to the letter. So I probably have missed a lot of things.
Well, work and stuff. I mean, I can't imagine. I think we did 105 videos, so that would probably keep you going for several hours. I mean, not that you'd be interested in all of them, but so that's forgivable. So, Mr. Gaz Williams, also Gaz Williams, bass player, producer, and all of those things. A purveyor of a very fine stripy top that is introducing all sorts of moray, but it's good. It's all fine.
If it was good a moray, is that all right?
Yeah, of course it's fine.
What if I went sideways on?
If you went side, but then the sleeves then start to moray. Oh, that's not going to work out. Anyway, how the devil are you, Gaz? Are you well?
Yes, I am. I am finally well after being poorly. Glepid, in fact, glepid. I'm trying to promote the use of the word glepid, one of my many words. I think I was just mentioning in the chat room, my biggest unfulfilled as yet ambition is to get a word that I've made up in the Oxford English Dictionary, or certainly in a dictionary of not just the Urban Dictionary.
Okay.
I've got many words. I've talked before about them, and I don't know why. I've always have. I think I've.
You want to be a language originator.
I've got about at least 20 words out there that people use unselfconsciously now. So yes, it's definitely something. But yeah, glepid. Glepid is. You could use the word glepid for anything, for grim, horrible, just oh man, I'm so glepid, like the morning after a heavy session, glepidity. And glepidity is a variation.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll bear that in mind. We'll have to keep an eye out for that one in the in everything. Let's get on to some news. I mean, news is not so much forthcoming in the post-NAMM period because everybody tries to either get it in beforehand or afterwards. But let's start with this. Here's some news. Nice video as well. This is Output's analog brass and winds, which is sort of follows very much on the analog strings, which is like a combination of brass samples together with synthesis stuff. It's all done in Contact Engine. And I have to say, I shot a video of it in their little private room, and it does sound lovely. And they have an interesting approach, which is very low, just 4 macros per sound, as the way they tend to do it. Though you can get in and do all the other stuff. And they seem to have really jumped in on the scene for new sounds. They definitely seem to have made a bit of a splash for themselves with all their instruments. And this is the new one. I don't know how much of a library user any of us are. I know Ty, who I know is very busy at the moment, he's probably already got it and has probably already used it. But I know I think he digs the Output stuff. I don't know, Yoad, do you kind of tend to go for these sort of big signature libraries from these sort of guys?
I actually went and bought it when I saw this video. And I already had Excel, which is really nice, and everyone is using it, and you hear it on every kind of pop tune in the past 3 years, which makes it maybe a little bit. But I got like loads of expansions for it and things. So I kind of. But actually, they had a really good deal. I don't know if it's still going, but they had a really good deal for their whole catalog. So I just purchased the whole thing, and I'm kind of exploring I'm not sure what to think about it. I mean, it's quite impressive. It's quite, it has that wow factor when you change presets and you and everything. I did a track using analog and strings and brass, or whatever it's called, and it's quite nice. Not sure what I think about it. I mean, it's basically a glorified sample library, because it's still using the Kontakt features, and so you use the Kontakt filters, envelopes, like all the effects and distortion and all that. It's kind of, I don't know. I know it's very tweakable, and there's a lot of. But when I try to dive in, I was wondering. It's like a preset.
I was wondering about that, because I mean,
for me, it's like a preset.
Right.
Sorry.
Carry on. Like a preset.
For me, it's like a preset browser, and if you happen to find the right preset that fits in what you're doing at the moment, then it's great, because it sounds really impressive. But I'm not sure whether I wouldn't like having just the samples that I can browse, like create like an init preset, and and
sort of
see what
right,
is actually there.
Well, presumably you could do that if you have the full version of Kontakt. I mean, it does work in Kontakt Player as well. I was interested when I was talking to the chap at the Output Cave that we made it into. What they were talking about, the idea that they've gone for this sort of 4 macro approach, and in many ways, they're as a company, they're even trying to kind of bring it down to less than that, so that you just distill the essence of the sound and create the maximum sort of tweakability or shaping, but with only minimal controls. I mean, because obviously you can get in behind the scenes and do all sorts of stuff, and I mean, I don't know for how many people actually do that, because that's in software, when you've got so many parameters there, it's not necessarily the most joyful experience for a lot of people. So it's harder to pull people in with that. So I think you would ordinarily, like you say, stick with the presets as well. So it would make sense that would be the case. Gaz,
I mean, I think that's the thing about these output plugins, though. They do have very funky controls, don't they? They kind of pick. I mean, actually, can you get an image up of the controls for this one?
Yes,
the main.
I do have it. Let me just give me a.
So they use, they use like these kind of slight. They've got a very interesting approach to the whole graphical aspect, haven't they? Rather than making things look like what's a skeuomorphic thing. They've kind of created a visual identity that's uniquely theirs, all very stylish, all kind of quite muted colors, but this has got this strange kind of look like brass. It's a very peculiar interface, isn't it? The actual,
the sort of, I see what you mean. It's almost like the kind of valves and levers on a flute or a saxophone, isn't it? Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's maybe an underrated aspect about plugin design. The actual, the look of it, as the way it feels, and it's quite inspiring to use. I haven't got this one, but I have got the previous one, the analog strings, and I've only just got it, so I'm just scraping the surface with it. But again, that uses a really attractive interface, and I don't know, ultimately that's just window dressing, but if you're going to spend quite a bit of time with these pieces of software, or it's nice to spend it in a nice room, a nice place to operate it. And output definitely have got, and I mean, the things do sound great, but it's almost their way of presenting stuff that's given them their unique sort of angle, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing that I did notice with all of the presets, because as we know, there's been this long history of you go back from the D50 upwards, where you kind of you've got this is a brass pad and a string pad, and sometimes it's very difficult to tell the difference between the two. There's just this sort of general muted sort of vibe to it with a bit of detune. But what they seem to have done is, every preset that I heard, anyway, there is a brassness to it that's undeniable, and I don't know if it's the same with the string. So they've really, their sound design, they're obviously very careful about it and very specific, and they do kind of try and retain the brassness or the stringness or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so they kind of I think they're still a relatively young company, aren't they? They haven't been around that long.
No, they haven't, and they have a lot of smart people working for them, and it definitely kind of is the thing that they do. Sorry, Yoad, you were.
I think they definitely took the capabilities of Contact to the max. I mean, like Gaz said, it's really nice looking. It's basically, when you strip it down, it's basically some frames that of graphics that you can just move about, which other interfaces, other Contact interfaces do as well. But their art is nice. It's just very stylish. For me, I would like to, and they do have one effect, movement, I think it's called, which isn't based, because it processes audio rather than an instrument. So this is not based on Contact, so it's just a player. I'm not sure, maybe it's based on React or something like that, but it's wrapped as a standalone plugin. So that one, I think that's a step in the right direction, because they're very imaginative and they're very stylish, and the sounds are very distinct, and it all sounds good. I would like to see them making something which is not based on Contact, and then they can maybe.
Well, that's always the big jump, isn't it? That's the jump when a company goes from that to developing their own engine. But that's the big leap. I mean, you have to sort of generate a decent amount of revenue to be able to afford the developers to do that. I mean, obviously Spectrasonics did it, and there was.
Well, Spectrasonics sort of did it though, didn't they? Isn't it the what's it, the engine under
Steam? Is it Steam that
Steam?
They use?
Oh, I see, the Steam. Sorry,
Steam
engine. You're right, the Steam engine. Yeah.
So I mean that is a big that's a big ask to do that, and I suppose that's the thing that obviously that's where the Native Instrument Contact engine it's so long in the tooth now. I mean, we're up to, what was it, version 5? It feels like it should be longer than that, but they've been the kind of they really took over. They took over from Gigasampler, didn't they? Which was the kind of previous way that people would pour their sample, certainly orchestral stuff in, because that had scripting and all the key switching and stuff. But then I think that just went by the wayside for whatever reason. Obviously a big job to keep all that going. But yeah,
I used to love Gigasampler. It was amazing. I loved it. And I stuck with it for. I had a dedicated PC that was running it. I think Tascam purchased them.
They did.
Nemesis, they were called.
Yes, that's right.
Really amazing sampler. What I did like about it, I mean, that was the first disc streaming sampler player.
Yeah.
And I still use the Giga Piano, it's called Giga Piano, but it's only 600 megabytes. But never mind. But it's still, for the time, it was amazing. It was unheard of. What I did like about it is the fact that it was really snappy. So it was on a PC, and on PCs everything is like instant and really snappy, and you change screens in no time, and you load stuff in no time. And with Contact, I still feel that it's a little bit sluggish. So when you're in a session and you touch the icon in order to open the GUI, it takes a good 6 or 7 seconds sometimes, even if you just go between. And this is something that I know that many people are used to it, and it's great, and it can do things that obviously it's quite unique, and also the content is
Well, it's
second
amazing,
to
isn't
none,
it?
because
Is that? I
everyone
mean,
is developing.
is that because it's running inside a host? I mean, if you ran it in the same way that you ran Giga as a sort of as a standalone application on a separate computer, would that make it more snappy? Or I mean, but then you're getting into that's the other problem, isn't it? The thing with
because
Giga. The thing with Giga is you had to then save another document and figure out a way to recall it, and there was all sorts of weird linking that you could do, and whatnot.
Obviously, if you run the Contact standalone application, then you wouldn't have to call the screen because it would be there. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
that would I like everything in my session, so I
Yeah,
know where
of
it
course.
is, and I don't have to. I used to work in the early days of mixing in the box. I actually started mixing in the box and working entirely in the box back in 95 or something like that, and I used to have 7 computers. One was just because there was no way you could process everything on one computer. So I had one computer running drums, one computer running guitars, one computer running vocals. I had another Pro Tools system that was just processing, because it was TDM with no latency, so it was just processing effect returns.
Wow.
Everything was running through a Creamware scope, which
Yeah.
had 64 digital ins and outs. It was a massive system, and I used to love it. But the downside was that for every song, I had to save 7 projects.
Yeah, and
And
then
although they were on the network, stored in the same place, it's a bit of a drag, but it was amazing for what it could do at the time. I'm
God,
talking 20, I don't know how
yeah,
many years
yeah.
ago,
Well,
and that
no,
was
I can
quite.
imagine that. But yeah, managing all of that stuff is a nightmare, isn't it? I mean, I suppose in some ways, that kind of takes us back to the situation. We've become very spoiled in a way that we can run pretty much everything on a single computer. Although some of the larger sessions, if you're running a lot of orchestral stuff, I know that people like Ty and other people who are composing to picture still run into these problems, memory limitations, and just the physical, not physically having enough of stuff to be able to deal with it, because it's just so big. And also when you've got all of those things kind of layered on layer, that it only takes one little kind of skip, and then suddenly something's going wrong, and then you're into kind of IT management and not composition. And that's something that is obviously we've all been there
Yeah, but
and
that's
still do to a degree.
yeah, but that's what I actually liked about it, because I always like to get distracted from actually making music or mixing, and that's why you know to the point that I'm actually developing software, as
Okay. So it's
opposed
an
to just
avoidance.
being a guitarist. So
It's a
that's
complex avoidance
it's not
technique, is it?
it's yeah, in a way, when I started playing guitar and I was looking for devices to connect the guitar to, and I was spending more time doing that. And throughout my career, it's always been like that. It's this duality between being a musician and being what is now like fully IT person, and I kind of like that.
I know what you mean. Problem solver. It's interesting because I mean, Gaz, I'd say you probably. I mean, whereas I know you enjoy the process of figuring out ways to hook up your gear together. That's one side of it, but you also very much creatively live in the moment. So it's just like, right, go, bang. There's, you're trying to create an environment where you can just splurge.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I've for many years really been interested in that, and I'm undergoing a bit of an electron phase at the moment, which if anyone's not familiar with the electron process, is very cerebral and very initially quite difficult to just be kind of instant with. Just trying to learn how to use the octatrack, and but once it starts to click, then I think it is a great facilitator of an instant way of working, like super quick way of working. So I'm quite enjoying that. But yeah, definitely have that constant sort of battle between, I suppose, the different hemispheres of the brain, really, and to be in the place which is the most creatively fluid is a direct sort of, it's in battle, isn't it, with the methodical kind of mindset.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But I guess in a way, that's why we are here and why we do what we do, because we are kind of music technologists as well as working, at least some of us working in that zone as well. Interesting.
I look at my I've got so many different systems in my studio, and actually across the house, like different in different rooms, different. I realized, like say, ranging from the OP1, which is like a self-contained system, to Native Instruments Machine, to all sorts of different things which are self-contained. So I think I'm still looking for the most, I'm definitely on some mission to find
you're finding the perfect thing. That's interesting, isn't it? It has parallels, doesn't it? You get these you get these sort of serially single people who are always looking for the perfect partner, and they're never going to find it because their expectations are completely unrealistic. And I wonder if there's an element of that similar kind of thing, that when we're looking for this perfect thing, if only I had that, I would be so productive, and everybody, and get so much more work. And I wonder really if that's actually the case, but that's perhaps a good discussion for another time. I'm just going to break things up a little bit, and we'll have a little message from our sponsors. Of course, this is iZotope Ozone 8. Don't forget to try this out. If you go to iZotope.com/ozone, this uses a lot of machine learning technology that allows you to analyzes your audio, asks you where you're aiming for, and then builds a workflow and a series of processing blocks that it thinks will be able to get you where you need to go. It's actually very smart, and it's something that's adapting the whole time. So it's not necessarily going to give you the whole thing based on, if you've got a different track, it might make different suggestions, and you don't have to follow the whole thing. The idea is it gives you a starting point, and it can get you there very, very quickly. All sorts of visual tools. We've got the spectral analysis tool, which allows you to see roughly between which frequency bands, what are acceptable amounts of energy. All sorts of stuff, additional help for visual mixing tools, because as we know, ears are great, but sometimes that extra visual cues really helps as well. The ability to run instances of Neutron 2 and other instances of Ozone from within the same master plugin, so you can adjust settings on multiple tracks to affect the overall output. You've also got the ability to A/B between a whole folder full of tracks. So if you've got your mix plus a number of targets that you're trying to get to, you can just A/B, volume matching, very important for that as well. Up to 10 references, so you can get regions and just say, well, does the chorus sound the same? All, again, useful stuff for getting you where you need to go, whether it be just in mastering or just maybe the sound of an individual track. Very powerful stuff. So if you check out iZotope.com/ozone, you'll be able to get the full functioning demo. I think it lasts for about 10 days. There's all sorts of really high-end tutorial techniques and information about how to use it. Thoroughly recommend you check it out if you're into mastering, or if you're into just kind of finishing your mixes and getting them to sound as good as you possibly can. So once again, we thank iZotope for their sponsorship of the show, and we should also say we got a competition. Last week we asked you to tweet the hashtag, what was it, MixFixer, that's right. And also we have a winner last week, a chap called Scott Baxter, who is at Luge21 on on Twitter. From Stutter Edit Pro to Trash to Iris 2, looking to complete my iZotope collection with Ozone and MixFixer. Very, very good. I've just realised I haven't actually set a hashtag for this week's competition, which is terrible. So I'm going to go for iZotope. There we go. I'm going to have to do this on the fly. So this week's hashtag is iZotope, the hashtag iZotope and the hashtag Ozone8. If you tweet that to at Sonicstate and at iZotope Inc. So that's the hashtag iZotope and the hashtag Ozone8 to at Sonicstate and at iZotope Inc. That will enter you into the competition for next week, where we will pick another winner. And once again, we thank iZotope for their provision of the prize. And Scott Baxter at Loose21, if you want to get in touch, then we'll be able to get that prize to you. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here because I'm feeling that this might actually have some relevance to all of you guys. We spoke about it a little bit last week. 10.4 came out just before NAMM, and there are a number of big features. This is Music Tech Help Guy who just gave us a rundown. One of the big deals is the ability to
Smart Tempo is to be able to import
Smart Tempo. So you can record sort of click-free, and then it will automatically map and tempo. So effectively, it frees you from the grid. This is probably one of the biggest ones. There are a number of other things. There's Chromaverb, there's Melodyne API, that side of things. And I thought I'd bring this in, Yoad, because I know that you use Logic, and I thought, what have you got to say about it? I mean, are you one of these guys that tends to keep really up to date with your working DAW? Or do you kind of like save it until a point where you feel you've got the ability to to devote the time to update your system? And is there anything in the 10.4 update that you really got to have?
So one of the benefits of Logic is that it's just a file. So you can always revert back, not even revert. You just, if anything goes wrong, you just keep using the old one. So nothing really, there's no risk in downloading a new version. I obviously make a copy of the previous one. Otherwise, it will go over it. So I just rename it and then or duplicate and let Logic go over the original one. So there's no risk involved in that. So yeah, I definitely keep up to date. I have a bit of an inside information, so I know a little bit about what's going to come out, and it's very exciting. With regards to the tempo mapping, basically, you could do all that in 10.32 and 3.3 and before, or whatever the previous one. So basically, you had all these capabilities, but you had to work a little bit harder in order to do that. And so it's all good and nice, but you have to remember that it's still based on transient detection, and transient detection is not bulletproof, and it's far from it. And from my past experience with Logic and other DAWs, trying to detect tempo, it's enough that it misses one transient and the whole thing goes completely out of sync. So if it detects, and I've been actually doing that. I don't know if anyone remembers SMP-24, the Steinberg hardware that was for Atari. It was an amazing machine that used to be able to basically do that. So you could feed it with timecode and audio, and it would create a tempo map that you could transfer to Cubase, and that would become the tempo map, and it would still be. So what I used to do is to take the kick and snare, put 8-note delay on it, and mix those together and feed it to the SMP-24, and that would create a MIDI map based on that. A MIDI, what's it called? A tempo map based on that. So this whole concept is not new to me, by all means. What I tend to do is, rather than let the host detect the transients, because one wrong. So if you get one quarter note instead of an 8th note or something like that, it would shift the whole tempo map and make it completely unusable. So you have to get every single one right. So what I tend to do is to basically, if I have something which is recorded without a click track, I tend to just record a MIDI. I take like a rim shot or something like that, and I just play. I play
right, so
to the song.
Okay.
I play to the song, then I edit the MIDI where I missed, where it's not completely tight. I just go and edit the MIDI. It doesn't take too long. It takes like 10 minutes. But then you have a click track that plays nicely with the music. And then I let Logic analyze that track and create a tempo map of that.
Right.
So
Okay.
then I have something that I can edit offline, and I can control where the transients are myself, and then I know that it's going to work. So it takes a little bit of time, but then
I didn't realize
right.
that. I didn't realize that there were. I mean, I guess it makes sense that it's working on the transients and works that way. I know, Gaz, because I mean, we briefly mentioned 10.4 last week, and you were saying it was a pretty decent update. I mean, I guess this is the thing that I thought might appeal to you is that. I mean, I know that you work off grid anyway, and you use, but it's quite an involved process. But it sounds like even with this, an entire song might be difficult. But if you're just recording little clips and short phrases, it might well work. But the examples I've seen so far seem to have been with quite transient heavy guitar parts, so maybe it wouldn't work so much. It's something that's a bit more floaty.
Yes, I mean it is, you know, it is a kind of like a sort of philosophical debate in a way about what is music, because this has to essentially make some sort of musical, you know, I mean, yes, it can look at the transients, but if you're giving it something like if someone's just played a tune on a bagpipes, and then you're trying to
that's not
tempo map it,
right?
But you know, so Cubase has had this sort of built in, but it's a much more it's a different approach with the Cubase one. And I've had quite mixed results with the Cubase one. I've had absolutely fantastic results. We did a video, didn't we, a couple of years ago with the tempo mapping in Cubase when that became, when that was that was a good video, actually. That demonstrates that quite well. But even still, when I'm doing music productions, I still tend to favor the Melodyne tempo mapping. And it is not that straightforward. The way I work that way is that I will... well, maybe if whatever I've recorded the track in, say I've recorded multi-track Cubase session, I'll open a separate, it's a bit long-winded, but this is the best results, is I'll open a separate instance of Melodyne 4 and then use the assign, I would choose multiple tracks. You see, what's it good with the Melodyne way of doing it is it uses multiple tracks,
so you get an average, you get more of an average across. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so you can choose what you think are the best indicators of the tempo. So if I've done like a multi-track session of a band playing, you know, I'd use certainly aspects of the drums. It doesn't need the whole drum track, but overheads, maybe kick and snare. I'd use bass, guitar, you know, and various tracks. And then you go into the assigned tempo, and you can do very sophisticated editing to the tempo map, and it's fantastic. I think it's absolutely amazing. And then what I'll do then is I'll export out a MIDI file as the tempo map, create a brand new project based on that MIDI, that tempo map, and then re-import the audio that was recorded. And then in Cubase, you can tell the audio files to set definition by tempo. So once you've done that, that's when the real clever stuff can happen, because you're essentially embedding that tempo map as the embedded into the audio. So then you can start to edit the tempo map in all sorts of creative ways. For instance, you know, you'll see the tempo maps moving all the time because the music was recorded without a click, but where you want the music just to kind of to be really steady, you can just draw.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, I suppose I was thinking that, you know, because Apple had sort of tackled it, it would be a bit more bulletproof and make more sense. But it seems like it's kind of, you know, it's
inherently a very difficult thing to do automatically. The good thing with the Apple way of doing it is it asks you to define the downbeat, doesn't it? Sort of, and then it'll align the tempo grid from where, like the downbeat. It
seems like it's more designed for shorter sections. I mean, if you had a whole song in it with a load of maybe tempo changes and what have you, or time signature changes, you'd be screwed. You'd have to kind of get in there and really dig it out.
An album which I produced last year, the Schnauzer album. It's called Irritant. It's on Bad Elephant Music, I think. It's that is music that is just crazy prog all over the place. So this wouldn't stand a hope in hell in following that. So we did it as a manual process for every song, and it took a month to tempo map that album using that melodyne, more or less. It took a lot of work, but then once that was done, what we were able to achieve. I just mention one thing quickly on this topic. Sorry, slightly deviating, but based on one of the things that's really useful to have is what I found was if there was a drum fill that I didn't particularly like or didn't feel very good, rather than going in and moving beats around, this is a multi-tracked microphoned drum track. Rather than going in and micromanaging the beats of a fill or whatever, what I would do is I would just move the tempo map. And as you just adjust the tempo map just during the duration of the fill, you can really change the way the fill feels. If it's
interesting. I suppose the thing is, I mean, how important is? I mean, Yoad, I guess a lot of the stuff that you do, or I don't know if it is now, but it has been sort of fairly rigid pop music, which is not rigid, but pop music which is generally fairly gridded and it's fairly heavy. Do you think there's a sort of element of production where people should be encouraged to work off grid because it adds a certain something, doesn't it? It makes something come alive in an indefinable way that you can't just sort of add with a plugin or whatever, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you like Gaz said, when you get it right, it's unbelievable, because then if you base your whole tempo mapping on the drums, actually that's something that you can still do. For instance, in Logic, if you get someone to play, because basically eventually what we want is something to feel really nice and natural, and that doesn't mean that it has to be played without a click, especially for pop and rock and folk and whatever. So what you could do, and you could always do that, is to get the drummer to play on a click track, but then to extract the groove from the what's called the groove track from the playing of the drums, and then it's much easier to detect the transients, and then you just force that to become the groove. You can do it very easily in Logic. And that's something that works really well. And what you can also do is take a drum loop that you like, or even a guitar riff that you like, and extract the groove from that and set it as your quantized groove. And everything you play and quantize will be quantized to that groove. But that usually refers to a couple of bars or something like that. But still, it will give you a nice feel for your whole track, which will not be so rigid.
Right. Okay, I understand.
So I know I've mentioned this before. I did this album with David Green, acoustic guitarist, and tempo mapped all of his, because he performed solo with acoustic guitar. Tempo mapped his entire album off his acoustic guitar, but added in some cases some drum machines stuff, and having a drum machine playing beautifully in time to a non-clicked acoustic guitar is amazing. It makes the drum machine just ebb and flow with such a beautiful human quality. It's amazing. I really, really recommend that way of working. So I'm hopeful now it's in Logic and it's quite a mainstream. They've made it as a big announcement. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when super duper creative types like the band Noah, with Lewis Cole and people like that, start to use it in ways that we can't quite perceive. I've done a little bit of this as well, which is really good fun, which is if you play stuff with the anticipation that you are going to tempo map it and then have other things play around with it, there's really interesting creative dimensions available to it, as well as it being a corrective tool, to actually use it.
I suppose the thing that I kind of get always scares me a little bit. It's like when you start messing with the phase of multi-tracks and you end up in this place where you're not sure where's right anymore. And if you're messing with the groove and the tempo map, there's the idea that you're applying this process and you're just sort of going, yeah, I think this is better. Is it better or is it just different? You know, that's the thing. I mean, I suppose if you know you've got a set of really great musicians who will do that kind of speeding up and slowing down and breathing, and you just let them play, and then somehow, you know, there's a button you can press that goes, okay, lock to that. So that means I can apply my loops, my appalling playing, and my quantized stuff to that feel as well. And I suppose that's the thing. It's knowing that the process between those 2 points is trustworthy, because once you're messing with it's very easy to perhaps lose sight of what it is that you're trying to do, and that's where I've always leaned away with that. Maybe that's why people stick to the grid, because they just go, I know that that's on time, and I know that that's that. Then I don't. There's no discussion. There's no ability to kind of go, could it be better this way or better that way? You're narrowing the amount of parameters that you've got to deal with at any one time. So I can understand why you might not go there.
It is something that dynamics, you know, isn't just this way, loud and quiet. Dynamics is a forward back thing, and musicians inherently know this. And when you're playing with great musicians, the ability to just to kind of lean in and to lay back just happens. It's not necessarily that you learn this. I think it's just an instinctive thing that's part of being a musician. And I think that the way that the grid has kind of sterilized that front to back dynamic over the last 30 years, I think is the clearest definition of why music from the 60s and the 70s is more soulful and better, frankly better, than the music that's come since it. I reckon it's the sterilizing of that front to back dynamic that is kind of is to blame.
Maybe so. Well, that's an interesting concept. Let's take this thing into a completely different direction. I don't know if you saw this. Let me see if I've got the right button here. Oh, yeah, this is the one. Did you see PaulXStretch is now available as a plugin, and I downloaded it. It's actually kind of cool. And this is the video from a chap called Beats Bastine, who's just doing a walkthrough, and this is the PaulXStretch algorithm used to work in a standalone application. It allows you to time stretch down 800% or plus, and we've found some really beautiful sounds in it, and this is now available as a plugin. Works as VST2 and AU as well, and it works on a recorded buffer and gives you a kind of the ability to play with all of that stuff. And before then, it kind of was a bit more sort of C sound, and you had to be really into that. I don't know whether is that something that you found, because I mean you can find such beauty in these super time stretch things. Have you downloaded this one yet?
Find this. No, but I know the original. I know the standalone. I think it's mind blowing. I think what you can do with it is just unbelievable, and I think that. That, you know, people mess with modular synths to create like a self-evolving textures and things like that. All you have to do is like take a song and throw it on there, and it will just do amazing and unpredictable stuff. And what I really like about the standalone, I'm not sure whether the plugins allows you to do that, is that you can set it so slow that it says it will take 5 million years to complete the song.
And there's a sort of John Cage element to that, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that concept, because when I was a kid, when I was really, really young, I had this kind of idea in my mind that I wanted, you know, those Garrard record players.
Yep.
Decks, yeah, that you could put it on loop, like on automatic, that the needle would go to the end and come back and play again with this funny arm and all that. And I always I had this vision in my mind that if what happens, it's like the sound of a tree in the forest. Basically, what will happen if you take a room and you put it there and you just leave it forever? What will happen? So that's kind of a similar concept to that. What will happen if you take a computer somewhere, let it do its thing for 5 million years, and
what will the file be like?
You know?
Well, does that mean that the file will be 5 million years long though? Because that would be quite difficult to listen to. I'd imagine nobody would ever get through to the end unless they sped it up again,
but
and then it would be.
Well, you never know. Maybe in 3 million years there'll be some guy opening this door, and there will be a laptop there, kind of still processing the file, and it will say, "Oh, you have 2 million years left."
Now that is
something like that.
That's a progress bar that would put the fear of God into anyone who's paying for a session, isn't it? I mean, that's the time to go. Yeah, anything more than minutes, frankly, is the concept. Yeah, it's interesting the way that this really does mess with fabric of time. We've seen examples. I mean, there was the classic, the Justin Bieber thing, which actually sounded beautiful. Partly, I think, because it was probably auto-tuned within an inch of its life, so the harmonics were very rigid, so scaling through them just sounded sort of quite amazing. And there's the crickets, the God's chorus, that sort of thing. I mean, seems like we are perhaps on the cusp of something that it could be, we've seen with granular synthesis and that side of it, but maybe this is taking it a little bit further and combining the PaulXStretch type thing into some form of instrument where we could take this as well. This could be something very fertile ground.
Yeah, it'd be nice to play it polyphonically, wouldn't it? Just sort of different songs on each key.
Interesting.
Holding chords and, out of entire songs, playing incredibly slowly. How many instances of it? Is it a plugin then, or is it?
It's a guy called, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Xenakios. He's done a PaulXstretch X, which is based on the PaulXstretch. It has lots of latency because you record into a buffer. What is it? Yeah, it runs in Windows, Reaper, Ableton Live, FL Studio. It's a AnyJuice plugin host. Reaper Live. I think I saw that the video was in Cubase, so I think it will work in most plugins.
I guess you could go through each Beatles song until you found one in every single key, starting the first kind of chord of each beat, and then map them to different notes, and then be able to
there's another
play.
Conceptual concept. Yeah, that's a prog album there, Gaz, isn't it?
Yeah, quite interesting. Just cool. Is it? How much is it, or is it free?
Well, it's basically donationware, so you can download it for nothing, and then there's a little button here, which I put on the news item as well, which you can donate via PayPal, and it's just a really nice idea. The idea of sort of stretching the fabric of time, because, like I say previously, it was a bit more scientific, and now, I mean, it's not the most beautiful looking interface. It's a bunch of sliders and what have you, and it's not clear what they all do, but you can get it completely for almost freeness, and it did work. So well worth checking out. And again, as you said, Yoad, the idea that you can just generate these sort of beautiful harmonic, spectral, kind of granular, weird soundscapes, and then I guess either record the output or sample that somewhere else, and maybe play that. Very nice thing. I think there could be an instrument in it somewhere. There was a time when we said this sort of thing, someone would make that kind of stuff. I'm not sure whether that's likely to happen this time, but maybe we can hope, can't we? Okay, well, it's now nearly 5 o'clock. We've got any other topics here that of the remaining ones that you feel very strongly about and would like to?
I'd like to talk about the Apple HomePod, just because of some of the philosophical quandaries that it throws up.
Okay, well, look, I'll just throw the webpage up because this is the news that, everybody's doing it, smart speakers and all that sort of thing. Obviously, we've had Sonos, we've had the Amazon stuff, the Google Home, I don't know what it's called, but now Apple have done their own thing, and inevitably it's more expensive and more stylish and more of whatever. I think there's a picture of what it's got going on inside it. So you've got, I think, 7 tweeter away, 6 microphone away, and a high excursion woofer, which sounds kind of like something made up, but I like the sound of that. And I have heard it. It sounds really good, and it works in the Apple ecosystem, which is probably the limiting factor. But the basic idea of it is it will analyze the room it's in and where it is in the room, and then provide the best sound based on the reflections and what have you. You can get stereo pairs and it's more expensive. But this raised a question for you, Gaz, didn't it? Which was what?
Which is... So most people will use these on their own. At the moment, there's no way of ganging them into stereo. So
is there not? It says that you can.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Coming
I
soon.
think it's going to be dependent on AirPlay 2 coming out, I think, where they negotiate. There's a kind of negotiation that needs to take place. So at the moment, these things are sort of essentially mono devices, except they're not mono devices because the tweeters throw out more that can throw out different sounds. Now, this does it well. So what happens is when it works out, say it works out, it's on a shelf and there's a wall behind it. The microphones sort of detect when it's playing music. It knows if once the music's left the speaker. When it bounces back, it works out like a kind of three-dimensional image.
So it'll phase align the tweeters, presumably.
Well, no. What it does is it does like a kind of mid-side sort of split. It separates the sides and the mid signal, and then it fires just the mid signal out at you, and it'll fire the side signal at the wall. So bouncing back what it calls it in the HomePod jargon as like the ambience channel, and there's the direct channel. So it's essentially kind of going, things that are like applause that it uses as an example will typically be more in the left and right channels, hard pan possibly. But it's not actually giving you a stereo image. It's giving you this thing that you hear the things like vocals and stuff coming. The focus, yeah. Now, I'm kind of thinking, what about our lovely stereo imagery that we spend hours on in a mix, getting everything right for devices like this, which will be the preeminent, not just the Apple one, I mean the Amazon ones. These are all essentially mono products that are,
and the Sonos as well, unless you have a pair, yeah.
Spatializing. Now, when it comes that you can chain two of these HomePods together, you still don't hear it as proper stereo. You still hear something, and I'm not entirely sure if they're going to split the mid sides and set one to only have the left side coming out of its ambient speakers, and then the right one. I just don't know. But it's this idea that our meticulous productions are being put into these devices that then are putting them through algorithms and changing how they sound. And the thing that I was wondering then, do devices like this, will they reward well mixed music in the traditional sense? But I just don't know. And things, if you're using extreme panning, I'm going to make a mix deliberately because we've got a HomePod downstairs. I'm going to make a mix with just of panning hard left and right and play it out of it.
See what it sounds like. Well, I'll guess it's some Beatles. Like. That's an interesting idea. I mean, yeah. Do you are you conscious when you're mixing to mono devices, mixing to this sort of new breed of smart speakers, which process the audio in whatever fashion, or do you try and not think about that too much?
Well, I'm always conscious about mono, obviously, because even from the vinyl days, which are pretty relevant again, a lot of people will double a guitar. Just delay a guitar and put it on the left, right, and things, and will not consider how it will sound in mono, and when you mono it could sound awful. So I'm very much aware of that. I think the concept of MS, of mid and side, is not necessarily a bad thing. You can fully recreate a stereo mix by encoding it to MS and then decoding it back. It will be transparent. The fact that they're using the walls to bounce it back off the walls, and so obviously it's diffused. It depends on how you set up the levels. I think that if you mix correctly, you shouldn't be too concerned about it. If there'll be a guitar or something, or a shaker or something that is hard panned, then yeah, it would sound a bit different. But largely, if your mix is balanced correctly and it sounds good, and it sounds good on many systems these days, when I mix, I stream straight from the desk to the phone. So I don't have to bounce a file and put it on Dropbox and whatever. It streams directly to the phone. So at any time I can listen to it.
You can check the mix
through the phone, which I do. I listen through my Samsung screen, monitor.
Right.
It's basically a TV, so I can stream to there. So So the output of my Logic goes to quite a few destinations as I mix through Soundflower and SoundGrid and things like that. So I can stream it. I can. So I'm aware of the different formats, but I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned about that, because you can until we reach a time where you are required to provide different formats, like on stems, on native instrument stems and things like that. I wouldn't worry about it too much, because I think you can easily get lost in all these considerations. So if you do your thing.
So here's a question for you then. I mean, the idea, obviously these are premium devices. This is a premium home speaker. I wonder whether there's a possibility that because they're creating this kind of premium, this premium listening thing, within the context of this, of the sort of the fact that it's just a speaker in your room, whether we might start to move towards, again, once they get the stereo thing sorted out, albums that, reportedly sound extremely good on the HomePod or replicate it extremely well. So therefore, music then becomes more of a listening experience again, like in the old days of hi-fi when people would sit down and listen to stuff. This might actually start to move things back towards that, and away from the commoditization of it, because Apple have entered the idea of creating this premium listening experience. It's not just a pair of buds, it's not the speaker out of your phone, it's actually a sitting in your house and in your room. So that possibly could be a good thing, right?
Something. Well, yeah. I mean, sorry, go on.
Yeah, just to touch on that. Basically, bear in mind that a lot of people listen to music on their headphones, and headphones, so when you take that into consideration, you don't put stuff, unless you want to, unless you do like a concept thing. But when you do like basically something that should be played amongst other songs on a playlist, and you don't want it to sound weird or anything like that, then you would kind of you would not put the drums on the right and the vocals on the left and things like that, again, unless you want to artistically. But if you want it to be compatible with other songs, then as much as people are aware of headphones, so it's basically the same thing. So I don't see it as a problem at the moment.
Interesting. But I did wonder about that. Sorry.
I got this. I'm wondering about an idea now. Like, some wave formats allow you to have multi-channel audio within a single file, don't you can get, what is it? I think just in the WAV standard, can you have, there's one or variation.
Yeah, you can have an interleaved. You can have an eight channel interleaved WAV file.
So if there was a way in the header of a WAV file to actually determine which mix within a WAV, now sort of like streaming speeds and stuff are so fast, music, ways that you could have a headphone mix and like a mono mix and various other mixes all embedded in the same WAV file, and that your device is intelligent enough to go, oh, you're listening on headphones, switch in the headphone mix, switch in the mono mix. I mean, I'd love that personally, because like, you can do super wicked, all sorts of smart psychoacoustic effects for headphone listening that just sound terrible on speakers. But you wouldn't have to worry then if you could embed
an interesting idea.
Mixes within a WAV file.
That sort of takes it a step on. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. It takes it a step on from stems, which presumably stems are, there is hardware that recognise it as whatever. So, then it becomes something that you could use in a certain way. So interesting.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
More work though. More work for everybody, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Well,
but,
it's optional. An optional thing. If someone wants to put a headphone mix into it, there's a way to embed a headphone mix into it. An optional thing. So you don't have to do it, but it's whether the hardware.
And then someone will figure out a way to play them all at the same time, and I get a really wow experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there is one thing I wanted to mention about the HomePod before we moved on, though, and that's the fact that there is no jack input. There's no way of playing music out of it. unless you use the Apple.
It drives me mad,
either.
this kind of thing. I mean, Sonos is the same. It's just like, I just want to play this audio that I'm listening to on my computer on my speaker. Is that possible? No. Or it is possible, but it's not quite possible without setting up some kind of weird streaming server and writing a preset for. It's just, it makes me crazy. It's like, I want to amplify something. I've just bought a stereo amplification system, but it won't let me unless I get something else that allows me to. It's just. Anyway, that's another thing. I think we'll probably leave it there, and we'll come back to it again. Yoad, thank you so much for joining us from Tel Aviv. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week there. I don't know how long you're there when we will see you again, but it's great as ever to have you on board, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And also, Mr. Gaz Williams, thank you also for joining us too. That's been a pleasure having you as well. An interesting concept about the idea of the multi-header WAV file. I like the sound of that.
What's the time difference, Yoad, in Tel Aviv to GMT?
It's now just past 7, so it's 2 hours ahead.
Okay, right. All right.
But I'm only back on Friday, so it's my kind of 5-day week when I'm here every month, and then I'm back on Friday morning.
Okay.
So that's a fairly easy jet lag to realign with then.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not.
Yeah,
it's
jet lag back from NAMM was wicked this year. It took me nearly 10 days to get over it. It was appalling. Anyway, but that's beside the point. I did get some summer sun, some winter sun. So what the hell? Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Don't forget, if you want to enter the competition to win Ozone 8 from iZotope, we're looking for the hashtag iZotope and the hashtag Ozone 8 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. And we will announce a winner next week. So without much further ado, we will see you all next time. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.